Well, that was the member of the Public Accounts Committee, Yusuf Sulemana, who's also the member of Parliament for Bole Bamboy, in an intellectual discourse with Benjamin Akakpo. And what he said that was interesting to me is that John Mahama is not corrupt, but President Akufo-Addo is. Anyway, we have more discussions coming up. But right now, we've got a conversation with former President John Dramani's aide. The team is currently on the Building Ghana tour, canvassing for votes ahead of the general elections. Joyce Bawah Mogtari has been interacting with Nana Yaojima, who's on tour with the team. We're bringing you that in a bit. Stay tuned.
For some weeks now, the NDC flag bearer, John Dramani Mahama, has been on a Building Ghana tour, which aims at collating the opinions of Ghanaians in building a party manifesto for the next election. Presently, the tour has made a stop at Tamale, where the flag bearer of the NDC has been engaging some groupings within the region. I have with me Joyce Bawah, who is one of the aides to the former president and flag bearer of the NDC, John Dramani Mahama. Hello, Madam Joyce. Welcome to Joy News.
Well, thank you very much. I am actually his special aide and spokesperson, so I am supposedly the senior aide to the former president. Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure that we embarked on this tour in the aftermath of Mr. Mahama's emergence as flag bearer of the National Democratic Congress. And so for the last few weeks, we've gone the length and breadth of Ghana. The main purpose is first and foremost to engage with the rank and file of the party. Secondly, to listen to the good people of Ghana from all walks of life. And thirdly, to be able to pick up on our thoughts as we go along to present in our manifesto for the 2024 election. I'm sure you know that the NDC in particular had a People's Manifesto in 2020. Indeed, this was one of the manifestos that was adjudged by various civil society organizations as being very, very responsive to the needs of our country. Indeed, what we intend to do is to build upon what we had in 2020 as we go forward. So I'm sure you've heard Mr. Mahama referencing to the manifestos as the People's Manifesto and asking people to raise the issues that concern them so we can continue to add on. My brother, the Building the Ghana tour is largely one of reconstruction, to reset, to rebuild, and to reposition the country as we all imagine and expect. Indeed, we also do know that Mr. Mahama is actually one of the most experienced in terms of our contests, and largely somebody who embodies the experience that we require, the temperament of the leader we need at this time, and the style of leadership that we require going forward. You and I live in Ghana. We are not oblivious to the level of corruption that has befallen this country. We are not oblivious to the level of hardship, to our inability to pay our debts, because Ghana now has an indebtedness of well over 570 billion Ghana cedis and counting. We are currently unable even to pay our external debt, and of course we have gone into an IMF program. You and I were in Ghana when we were told that Ghana was going to be above aid, that Ghana will never go back to the IMF, that indeed we commemorated all these things with watches, celebrations, etc. Be that as it may, Mr. Mahama presents a great opportunity for Ghanaians to hope again, for Ghanaians to anticipate the type of leadership that we all imagine. Indeed, we expect a certain experience, a certain modesty above everything else, because one of the biggest challenges today is the level of unbridled waste, the level of unbridled corruption and stealing, the lack of discipline. And you heard yesterday the Yana in Yendi, who mentioned the fact that he expects a leader who will be firm, a leader who will reshuffle even persons very close to him. And I think that that is a mark of every leader that we all answer. Look, everything we worry about is about leadership. If a leader refuses to fly on private jets, people will know that he's being modest. If a leader refuses to waste on a national cathedral and put in so much money at a time when we are totally broke, people will appreciate it. If a leader will use every opportunity he gets to reset the button by way of building back on what we've lost. Look at the country Ghana. If you pick up a bill from, say, Papaya or any of the food joints, look at the number of taxes on there. Mr. Mahama has promised something, a complete tax overhaul of existing taxes, one that will be handed to experts so that at least they can all work on it and be sure to review them. We are also looking at corruption. Look, one of the main reasons why all of us are poor and suffering is because of the levels of corruption.
So far we've been to 10 regions, and you are aware of some of the issues that are being raised by the people in these regions. What are some of the common elements that run through all of them?
Oh, you and I both know. The first one is infrastructure. Infrastructure. And the reason is simple. Everybody knows that Mr. Mahama, as president, focused largely on rebuilding Ghana's infrastructure. In terms of education, our schools, in terms of hospitals, in terms of road infrastructure. And you see, the one thing about Mr. Mahama was that he was practicing a totally inclusive system of governance. One where there's equity, one where the national cake was shared amongst everybody. And so under his watch, each and every region got its fair share of the national cake. And one thing that has also stood out is the fact that people are worried also about education. They believe that we should take a second look at preschool education, primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. You've heard some of the students about accommodation on campuses across the country. You've heard some of the chiefs and queen mothers about the lack of health facilities in particular. You've heard about the national health insurance and how the poor are suffering more. You were in the Ashanti region with us when they spoke about the Afariwa hospital. That hospital has been left all these years later. We saw as we drove through Adansi Asokwa, the E block that is almost on the mouth of the road and has been completely abandoned. So there are many of these projects. Indeed, at a time when the country is totally broke, where we need to take a second look at what is a priority, remember that health is important. So Mr. Mahama has spoken to the fact that instead of making large and verbose promises, he would consider rebuilding and first and foremost completing all the outstanding projects.
Staying on these projects, we know that from the conversation that has been going on, the country is having challenges with financing. How is Mr. Mahama going to finance these projects, especially when he himself has admitted that it will be very difficult for him when it comes to issues of the economy and raising resources to finance some of these projects?
Have you looked at the Auditor General's report lately? If we can stem half of that level of stealing, if we can recover half of the monies lost to individuals, if we can stem corruption even by half of what we have currently, I'm sure we'll have enormous resources to apply to the areas that need it most. If we can keep costs down, keep waste down. Remember also that in terms of health infrastructure, there is always funding available. That's one. Secondly, in terms of reforms to corruption, remember that everybody is interested in this subject, and so there will always be avenues for you to raise funding to do so. In terms of road infrastructure, some roads are commercial roads. Once you finish, you put a toll on them and you recover. We were here in this country when the road levy was collapsed. And then, of course, the tolls were collapsed. And we're told that we're going to turn those toll booths into what? Toilets and bathrooms for people to use. What Ghanaians are also looking for is a consistent style of leadership. A leader who is honest, trustworthy, and one who can be trusted. In any case, remember that the reason why we are having these conversations around Mr. Mahama, and I believe personally that he's one individual who was treated very, very unfairly. That the yardstick that was applied to the Mills Mahama administration, if same had been applied to this useless MPP administration from the beginning, the government would have collapsed by now. Completely collapsed. The level of scrutiny, we were told that sole sourcing was going to be what? History. That it will be ending immediately they took office. What has happened? Even for the National Cathedral, one that is not a matter of life and death, nothing was done through competitive tendering. Everything was sole source. And for many other projects, go to the Public Procurement Authority. In fact, indeed, there, One of the first whiffs of corruption that arrived and greeted Akufo-Addo and Bawumia was from the PPA itself, from a gentleman who at a time was actually a key state witness in the case that brought Madame Charlotte Osei home. These are the people who are currently in government. We are all very skeptical about the future of this country under this administration.
Talking about the fight against corruption, former president has, he once had his term in office. He did what he could do, but a lot of the people, especially on the NPP side, tagged him corrupt. Now, what is the strategy that is different from what he did when he had his time in office?
Let me take it from what our peer review mechanisms have given us. Ghana Integrity Initiative, that used to commend Mr. Mahama for his swift action on some issues to do with corruption, has recently, as 2 weeks ago, scored Akufo-Addo and Bawumia 0 in any attempt to fight corruption. We were told that President Akufo-Addo was going to use the ANAS principle to fight corruption. What he has done is to clear everybody who has been accused or alleged to be corrupt. Indeed, the special prosecutor, when the first officer was being sworn in, we heard Mr. Akufo-Addo on Mr. Martin Amidu. What has changed? Indeed, one of the challenges we had was the attacks by Mr. Martin Amidu on Mr. Mahama and his administration. If you remember, when the same gentleman was made special prosecutor and tried to make similar accusations by calling President Akufo-Addo the mother serpent of corruption, we all saw what happened. When he gave an opinion on the Ajapa deal that was brought before him, what happened? He was literally chased out of office. In frustration, the man resigned and screamed that he was afraid for his own life. This is what we have as an example currently. So, of course, Mr. Mahama's record speaks volumes. I was at the Ministry of Transport when the bus branding issue occurred. In fact, when you look at it today, we were looking at how much? 1 million Ghana cedis at the time. But the noise that greeted that issue. But what did Mr. Mahama do? He actually asked one of his most popular ministers to tender her resignation. The matter was investigated. Indeed, the contractor even paid some amount of the money back to the state. When have you heard under Mr. Akufo-Addo or Mr. Mahmoud Bawumia that anybody who was alleged or accused of being corrupt and investigated has been asked to resign or do anything that we know about? Remember what happened in Mr. J's case. Indeed, even the monies were returned to him. The most disgraceful act of corruption in recent times is the matter to do with Madame Sisi Adapa. And you heard Mr. Mahama. Can you imagine that John Mahama were president and a matter such as that with Sisi Adapa had happened? All hell would have broken loose. You see, I think that there's one thing that I always say. Let's be fair to our leaders. Let's show empathy. Let's be considerate in the way we criticize them. Because you see, sometimes, because of the level and the nature of criticism that came even from Nana Akufo-Addo and Bawumia, the lies and the falsehoods they peddled against Mr. Mahama, everybody actually moved towards the NPP, even neutrals.
Don't you think the NDC is now doing the same to the party in government?
Let me tell you one thing, we cannot do quarter because you need at least 75% of the media to be on our side. If we had that, we wouldn't even do anything. In fact, we are campaigning even way too hard. You understand? If we had 50% of the support that Nana Akufo-Addo, then candidate, enjoyed from the media and from many key actors, my brother, I can bet you Mr. Mahama can go to sleep.
Is it that the media is not amplifying your voice?
They try, but to what extent?
That's why we are having this conversation today.
Thank you. And that's why I say that in recent times, we have actually gained some level of respectability, but not when we're in office or when we're leaving office. I'm sure, look at the matter of the Ford navigation, for example. Ask yourself, do you think that under Mr. Akufo-Addo, we haven't received bigger gifts than that? Even when the matter of the private jets came up, we were told that it was somebody who was sponsoring those private jets. Check the cost of that as against a Ford Navigator. Indeed, have you ever seen Mr. Mahama using a Ford Navigator? You know, one of the things going for Mr. Mahama is his modesty, his humility. You've been with us this whole trip. I'm sure sometimes even you get surprised at the man's nature, at his affability, and his level of knowledge about the things that really matter. You know, one thing I must confess is that if things had not failed for the New Patriotic Party, maybe even you will not be following us on this trip. Considering all that they promised you, the lectures, to be better managers of the economy, to move us from taxation to production, to find and arrest the dollar for all of us to see. My brother, John Mahama means well. John Mahama loves Ghana. John Mahama is a patriotic citizen. John Mahama will not steal your money and give it to just a few members of his family. I believe that I suffered because I was John Mahama's relative. I believe strongly that I did. Not because of anything, but because I have always been a member of the NDC.
In what way? In what way did you suffer?
Everybody, I almost became like the symbol of whatever you consider as family and friends. Think about it. You know, the first time I heard it, I was so shocked. I thought, what's going on here? My father worked in the PNDC, in the NDC for many years. So I thought, how is that possible? But ask yourself, today, in the same breath, the same people who called the press conference and made me a common deputy minister, considering my level of qualifications at the time, and made the subject matter that everybody walked into. Today, they have over 50 family members, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters, you name it. And when you call them nepotistic, they tell you that their grandfathers educated them well. Hello?
On this talk, we've heard Mr. Mahama plead with the labor unions to grant him some time when he is elected into office. You know, before they start making demands, they should join in making some money for the country before these demands come. Already we have labor unions on strike. So it means that if Mr. Mahama should be successful in this election, he will inherit all these strikes. What is your opinion about his request and what is currently happening on the labor front?
You see, let me say that if it was not for democracy, I'll say what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. We were here when they got nursing students to roam around roughshod over Mr. Mahama, disrespecting and defacing his posters across the length of the country. They went into schools and sang all sorts of insults and rained them on John Dramani Mahama's person and on his image. Thanks be to God, and inshallah, 8 years later, all of us have realized that all of it was just lies because they wanted power. Today they are in office. What is the story they are telling all of us? The matter is very, very simple. The matter speaks for itself. That Mr. Mahama will certainly be a better leader for Ghana at this time. And I'm sure that even the labor unions know this. Because Mr. Mahama is a man that they've always known. They've always worked with him. But for the partisanship of Mr. Akufo-Addo and Bawumia, I'm sure that even at the time, the labor unions were willing to sit and jaw with Mr. Mahama, as we've always done. But you see, they were convinced at the time that this was a government that was rendering you poor, that it was because of the Mr. Mahama and his administrations that you people were not getting paid well. 7 years later, what is the story?
But you think now, when Mr. Mahama should come back to office, they'll have that kind of patience that he's seeking from them?
I'm sure that all of us have learned some good lessons. We've learned the value of collaboration. We've learned the value of negotiations. We've also learned the value of what transparency and accountability can do for us. And Mr. Mahama put it beautifully that he will sit with members of the labor union. In any case, why are we even having this conversation? We should be working very hard in the hope that we can get these stealers out of Jubilee House. We can get these corrupt people out of Jubilee House. That we should get this nepotistic administration out of Jubilee House. Above all, we should also ask God to give us a considerate, understanding, and tolerant leader. Even you in the media have suffered your fair share. A few days ago, I got a story about how they are forcing people on some media portals to drop negative stories about this administration. So imagine that I picked up a phone and called multimedia, for example, to harass you, literally to drop a story. Or I hounded you out of office like we did many of the other people that they've hounded out. Where is Manasseh Azure today? Manasseh is my brother. But there's one grudge that I bear him, and it is how he conducted the matter to do with the Ford navigation issue. I'm surprised that today, as we speak, with regarding SMN, where is he? He put out that documentary, and what happened after that? If they use the same yardstick that they used for Mr. Mahama, to fight this. And I'm telling you, Ghana will have no government. We'll be stateless by now.
But are you sure that the NDC was unfairly treated by the media?
Oh, largely, to a wide extent, yes. Don't forget that I was actually in the media a lot. And I look back on it 7 years ago and now. My brother, if we had even been fair and balanced in our assessment, in our reportage, I'm sure that the story would have been different. But I know that today, all of you here, if you'll admit it to me personally, you will admit that you are worse off than where you started from. That all you had to do at the time was raise the issues and force the government to sit up. Today you are raising the issues. What is happening? Nobody's listening.
So let's talk about the Building Ghana tour. In rebuilding the economy, the former president has spoken about industrialization and taking advantage of raw materials available in various regions to drive industrialization and create jobs. One thing that keeps running through the minds of many is Mr. Mahama is talking about financing, and now he's also promising to start revitalize some of the industries, to build new industries and all. How should we marry the two, especially with a challenged economy and building industries to create jobs for the youth?
It starts with patriotic citizens. As you and I speak today, we all know and appreciate where we are. It is very, very obvious that one of the biggest threats to our security today is unemployment, largely. And when Mr. Mahama started with that huge infrastructure drive, the reason was simple: to create opportunities for people to get what? To get jobs. Jobs in construction, jobs in real estate, jobs in agric, and jobs across the length and breadth of this country. Indeed, yesterday I visited the rice processing farm of Avnash, which is not too far from my family home. I was totally crestfallen. Why would a rice mill located in the center of Tamale not be working? I am beginning to believe that most of the industries that were left behind by Mr. Mahama, like they did with Commander, was deliberate, because they lied about this one district, one factory that they've been unable to do. The best thing is to what? Sabotage the ones, because of course, if the rice mill is working, every day you hear Mr. Mahama's name. If the Big Share Butter Processing Factory is working, every day you hear Mr. Mahama's name. Of course, most of these people just need some resources, for example, from the Exim Bank. But of course, you know that any project that is associated with the NDC or Mr. Mahama, there is no way you have access to any level of funding. And that is part of the challenge. So yes, the only option we have, and this is for all of us. You see, when it comes to unemployment, it's not about MPP or NDC. Well, of course, unless you are from that small Achim cabal, then of course your story will be different, because they've stolen enough for generations to continue to feed fat on us. But in terms of you and I, the ordinary citizen, I come from the northern region. In fact, now Savannah region, since the demarcations were done. I know what it means. Look at the value of UDS to our communities. If you were someone who was visiting here maybe 10, 12 years ago, look at the environment now. Look at what the academics of this country have done to this city. Tamale is now one of the largest growing metropolises, largely because of a sacrifice by late Jerry John Rawlings, one that was seen to fruition by Professor John Evans Atta Mills. And then eventually, John Mahama replicated the campuses in and around the northern regions of Ghana. My brother, Ghana is not just Greater Accra. There are many other, now we have 16 of them. Every leader must understand what equity means, and that everybody must have a little bit of what is available. And that is what we are looking for.
Talking about taxation, Mr. Mahama has promised to do away with some of the taxations or taxes that he feels are not relevant. Now there is VAT being imposed on electricity. Organized labor, they are out now speaking against that, and they are ready for a demonstration against the VAT. Mr. Mahama wants to abolish it. How is he going to raise that revenue that is needed to rebalance the economy, especially when he is talking about cutting all these taxes, COVID levies and others?
My brother, this country is a very rich country. And I'm sure you remember Yetisika Sonso Akomdie. You understand? if we were able to ensure that our leaders were sincere with us, that our leaders will collect our revenues and apply them as they should. You heard how much Mr. Amishadai earns as a GRA boss. 137,000 Ghana cedis. That is enough money to take care of at least 50 staff in a small manufacturing company. I run one, so I know. So tell me that if we were to remove all these fat cats, feeding fat on our small taxes, how do you think we'll be able to utilize? Look, Nana Akufo-Addo is who he is today because of VAT. When he started those Kumipreko rallies against then Jerry Rawlings, even strongman Jerry Rawlings withdrew the VAT bill and went back for consideration. It was reconsidered, the figure was reduced. But even then, look at the numbers of all of the actions that took place, demonstrations across the country. In fact, that is when we all discovered that Mr. Akufo-Addo was actually a human rights lawyer. We didn't know that at the time. Today, the same man is president. And every day, NHIL has gone up. There's a COVID fund long after COVID ended, and yet under COVID, these are people who made well over $5 million of free money from various donor agencies. How were they using those monies? Seriously, that is a very serious matter, this COVID tax issue. We currently are looking at all these other taxes, including the sanitation tax. Look around you. Have you seen sanitation workers across this region since you've been here? We were in the Ashanti region. We were in the middle of KJTia. You saw the level of rubbish everywhere. And what were the market women saying? And that nobody is helping them even to come. But we are paying a 1% sanitation tax. My brother, if Mr. Mahama can streamline our taxes first and foremost, if Mr. Mahama can work on the constitutional review process, that will also rope in Article 71 office holders. If Mr. Mahama can improve upon infrastructure and complete the projects that are outstanding and being destroyed by the vagaries of the weather, if Mr. Mahama can unite the good people of Ghana, I'm sure that by the time he is able to put all these items together, you and I will begin to see the benefits translate into our pockets. You hear the announcements every day from GRA about the fact that they've exceeded their targets. Where is the money going to? Immigration doesn't sleep. The airports are open. People are still paying. The passenger tax is going. Where are those monies?
Now let's talk about some issues that have made some trends when it comes to the Building Ghana tour. One, we had the former president speaking about LGBTQ, saying that his religion or his belief is against that. Does that mean that when he comes to office, he is going to ensure that this issue of homosexuality, you know, the law that is being made, that the bill before Parliament now is passed, and he is going to assent to it? Is that the explanation or the sense that we are supposed to get from what he's saying?
You know, I remember listening to the UK Prime Minister, Honorable Sunak, when he spoke on this matter. All he did was to reaffirm the fact that biblically, the human race is made up of a man and a woman, and that it is almost incongruous for him to conceive of the fact that you have a man who says they have now become transgender and so are now female and want to be considered as such. And that as far as he is concerned, the sex you are assigned at birth is your sex all through your life. I believe that along similar lines, Mr. Mahama goes to the Assembly of God Church. He's a Christian. And so he knows that the church is very reluctant even to have a debate on this matter. We have also heard that there is a bill in Parliament currently that is waiting for presidential access. But you see, presently, Mr. Mahama is not president of Ghana. I think that is a question that clearly we should direct to Nana Akufo-Addo and, of course, to his vice president, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. But, of course, Mr. Mahama has stated categorically this is his position as a Christian, family-oriented gentleman who wants to lead this country in the next few months.
But does that mean that he'll facilitate the passage of the bill and assent to it if it gets before the president?
But that's if it's not done.
If he wins.
It's not done. You understand? If it's not done, I'm sure that's something that he will consider. But of course, we are hoping that irrespective of the fact that he will be in office soon, that Nana Addo will live up to his own words for himself. Because I heard that It's been there for a while. I know also about the witchcraft bill that apparently he's also refusing to sign into law. I believe that he even wrote to Parliament for the very first time, stating reasons why he wasn't going to do that and quoting copiously from the Constitution of Ghana. So, look, I believe that Mr. Mahama has stated his position very, very carefully, and it was a one-liner. He has also spoken about free SHS and the fact that he does not intend to cancel. In any case, Mr. Mahama was actually on the way to implementing free SHS. What we need to do now is to develop a certain conversation, have a blueprint so that we can put it into proper perspective, create a better way in which we can improve quality. Above all, look at the level of times the kids spend at home instead of being in school. And when they are in school, what is the content of the education they are receiving? Look, if we do not manage free SHS well, in the next 10 years, we will have many educated illiterates. Lack of skills are a big problem for us now. And so it is imperative that anybody seeking to lead Ghana must direct their attention towards a certain skills development. All of us here are multi-talented. It is why we can have these engagements and have these conversations. If we do not start to inculcate that into our young school-going children, Ghana will be poorer irrespective of the investment being made. The challenge now is that they are not even investing. Secondly, even the feeding for the children, I'm sure you heard Mr. Mahama speak about school feeding. It's become like political achomo, and everybody is sharing and taking their share. The only people who are suffering are the kids who are supposed to be fed. We took this whole process away from the schools and handed them to party apparatchiks. Currently, the schools have no control over what is brought for kids to be fed. My mother used to work at the Buffer Stock Company years ago. I know why that company was set up. Today, for all the effort that they put in, it is not living up to expectations. They even send expired grains to these poor schools, and the teachers have their hands tied to their back because they have no resources and they have no way of resolving these issues. The parents must continue to contribute largely to any conversation about free SHS. And I'm happy that the Charles, the Nat, and every well-meaning Ghanaians agree that Mr. Mahama makes a very important point, that this conversation must take place. We must worry about the future of free SHS. We must worry about the quality of education, even the quality of the teacher. And don't forget, Mr. Mahama spent a lot of time on improving teacher quality, on improving access, better training for teachers, and above all, started infrastructure to ensure that we had adequate classrooms for these children to go to school.
On another very controversial issue, the Black Stars, Mr. Mahama made a comment on the Black Stars when he was in the Upper East region that he will make local players from the nucleus of the Black Stars when he is voted into power. It's something that a lot of people are bashing Mr. Mahama for. Is he still standing by what he said in the Upper East region?
You see, let me put it in context. And I listened to an ex-conversation yesterday, and all your media sports journalists were on. Fentuo was on, Sadiq Adams was on, Bridget Otu herself, a football enthusiast, was on. They had many other people, including the Honorable Ablakwa, who's come up with matters to do with unaccountability and lack of transparency and some corruption in terms of funding for this last Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Look, there is something that is lacking in the current team of Black Star players. Lack of camaraderie, lack of cohesion. They don't even know one another. The training periods are so short that they have no time even to work with one another. We all saw Inaki Williams as soon as he left. We saw what he did for his team. We've seen, is it Didi or you, one of them, what he did. We all know what Kudus is doing and what he did even in this very disgraceful tournament that we've just returned from. My brother, when we used to have the likes of Tony Yeboah, Tony Bafo, Abedi Pele, and all these other ones, they were young people who had played together apparently in the under-16 tournaments, and then they developed from there. Some of them had played in the other Premier Leagues like Bofuakwa FC, Hearts of Oak. When was the last time you heard that a player from Hearts of Oak was in the Black Stars? A player from Asante Kotoko is in the Black Stars. A player from all the other small Premier League camp. In fact, What is happening now is that corruption is so bad and there's so many conflicts of interest situations within the GFA that even we are told, it may be an allegation, that they even now have teams that are owned by them. And these are the teams that they are promoting even within our Black Stars. You know, there is something in training, there's something in building rapport, there's something in building camaraderie, and of course, there is also something in being patriotic. Those countries that have no pennies, they go and play and do better. We heard about Uganda, and I've heard people criticize us for carrying money on an aircraft and taking $3 million. Do you remember what Asamoah Gyan did when the money arrived? Go back to the social media photographs. All of that now, when I think back, they were all very partisan. Because later on we heard the comments from Asamoah Gyan regarding one political party or the other. So they were not playing and playing their hearts out. They only playing because they wanted to make one government unpopular. Why do you think that at some point in time, a lot of people, even on the political divide, refused even to support the Black Stars? It was because for the first time, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, as candidate then, even politicized. And you saw some of the tweets going all over the place. We don't have lights and now we've even lost at AFCON. If Mr. Mahama were like Nana Addo, I'm sure that instead of asking for solutions, he will go out there to and make digs at him. Look, my brother, let's call on our leaders to be honest. Let's call on our leaders to be sincere. Let's work for leaders who care a little bit more. You see, there's something about leadership that we always forget. Let's ask, what do our leaders stand for? Is it just the rhetoric? Is it just the talk? Is it just the noise? Or because it is beautiful and sexy to be a leader? I think it is time for all of us to start to think through what is the nature of leadership that you and I will be proud of, that our children will respect and be happy with. The type of leadership that when you hear the leader speak, it is credible, it is believable. You know, I hear them now trying to say, oh, no, you know, the political class is doing this. The political class is shaming each other. Oh, we are talking about corruption too much. That is why the numbers are going down. Really? Who shamed who about corruption? Mr. Mahama, in his day in office, Professor Mills, if you remember, went all the way to the GRA. And he himself locked doors at the GRA because he had been a former IRS boss. And he knew the sorts of things that were happening there. What was he called? Mr. Doolittle. Wherever he is today, may his soul rest in peace. Mr. Parkwesi Misata is one of Ghana's longest serving deputy finance ministers, a technocrat par excellence. As the vice president, he was ridiculed by a guy who was his deputy at the Bank of Ghana and told that he was giving him 170 questions. At a time, the dollar to the cedi was 3.1. Today, that gentleman trying to tell us that he is worthy or believes that he has acquitted himself creditably enough to run and lead this country. I hope that tomorrow when he is done, the same yardstick that you apply to other leaders, that you will ask him the 170, in fact now there will be 340, because in the last 7 years, today the dollar to the cedi is 12 cedis and counting. You can't even buy the pound. And as for the rest, don't go near them. And in terms of corruption, in terms of livelihoods and hardship, Ghanaians are worse. In fact, even on the index of poverty, Ghanaians have gotten poorer. So it means that today, most Ghanaian families cannot even afford 2 square meals. And look at the cost of food in Ghana. I heard about a debate about kinke a few days ago. I heard a debate about bread and the cost of a loaf of bread. Kinke is a staple, just like TZ. So if today we cannot afford to buy maize, and we are even importing maize in the last 7 years, we heard it. You see, look, for all the reasons why Ghanaians went out there, and I remember those days, Mr. Akufo-Addo used to boast about it. Almost 1 million Ghanaians voted for me. Where are those million Ghanaians today?
That's a question you have to leave to the viewers. Thank you very much.
You forget, and I will just add as a footnote. In 2020, for example, something extremely unique happened in this country. That a government that had lost in such large numbers returned to be at par with the majority in parliament. And I still believe that is an election that the NDC almost won. The question is why? Have any of us averted our minds to the reasons why? It was because President Akufo-Addo and Bawumia squandered their goodwill in the space of 2 years. You know, the minute the cash for seats happened and he defended it, then the minister got into trouble and he defended it. And then the Ameri, which was one of the biggest whips that was used for Mr. Mahama, suddenly became the topic. And what were we told? Oh, no, with us it's okay because we are only extending it. What about the man who brought it to fix a challenge that we're all going through? My brother, I want to appeal to the good people of Ghana to test our leaders, to question the motives for which they want to run for office, to demand accountability and transparency from our leaders. Mr. Mahama has promised one thing, that he will first and foremost be accountable to the good people of Ghana, that he will be very transparent, and above all, he will crack the whip when the time comes. So let's remember to vote for Mahama in 2024.
Thank you very much. How soon are we wrapping up with the Building Ghana tour?
Well, I'm sure that we have 3 regions more to go. In fact, 6. This is the 10th one. So hopefully we are doing Greater Accra between the 14th, 13th and 14th, and then the rest will follow suit. I'm sure, looking at the calendar, 20th we are supposed to be somewhere in the Upper West region, and then we'll be going down. So I'm sure by the middle of March, this should be over, and then we can take a well-earned break, work on the manifesto, and then certainly set up the campaign team. And don't forget, Mr. Mahama has a huge announcement coming of who his choice of running mate nominee will be. So yes, we have quite a number of items on our calendars. We also have some international trips that have been lined up. So we hope that we can complete and conclude these tours very, very quickly. I think that one thing these tours have done, it has actually told me and many others that people believe and trust the process. And they are actually acknowledging that John Mahama did and continues to do his very best for this country. And I'm hoping that that confidence will reflect in the elections of December 2024.
Thank you very much. So that's Joyce Bawah Mogtari, who has been giving us insight into some of the things that the flower bearer of the NDC, John Dramani Mahama, has been saying on the Building Ghana tour. As she says, 6 more regions to go. That's to wrap up with the Building Ghana tour of the NDC. And by the middle of the year, there's a higher possibility that the NDC will release its 2024 manifesto for the election. For Joy News, Nanaya Ojima reporting.